everybody. Welcome into our latest live broadcast. Today it is Tuesday, the 13th of August, 2024. My name is CareyHolzman. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We've got a update to an AMD motherboard we prepped. Little backstory on this one is we built the system here with an AMD 3900X. Now, I can't remember at the time why I picked up the 3900X, but it does require a graphics card. And pricing graphics cards, they're still too prohibitively expensive for us to finish building this with a GPU. It's cheaper to simply change out the CPU. So I went online, I found a fair price, not the cheapest, not the most expensive, but what I feel is a great value for the dollar. Ryzen 7 5700G, that's got the built-in graphics. This costs about 1/3 the price of a graphics card that we would put in here that would be halfway decent. Why you would buy a graphics card for more than the price of an entire console, let alone buying 3 or 4 consoles for the price of one graphics card, is beyond my comprehension. So the business that I run, we haven't been selling graphics cards since the pandemic. And I don't think I'm going to be back into selling graphics cards. If people want to buy a gaming PC for me, they just simply buy a PC and add any graphics card of their own choice that they purchase and acquire and install. And now they've got a gaming PC. That's all there is to it. But I don't want to deal with the warranty, how fragile they are in shipping and how likely they are to break or to cause problems with the motherboard or to ship it separately and have the customer install it. I don't want to take on the warranty and the support, and it doubles and sometimes triples the cost of the entire computer by adding a graphics card. So if you have that kind of money and you want to spend it that way, and you can go to somebody else for support, because I have way too much going on and I'm trying to juggle a lot of items, and I don't have that kind of time to spend with somebody who can't get Call of Duty running. So for that reason, you haven't really been seeing any graphics card options on this channel since the pandemic. All of those reasons combined. That doesn't mean I don't build gaming PCs. It just means that the PCs I build would need graphics cards. And you can spend as little as $250 and as much as $2,500. It's on you to do that and where you want to source it. And then whoever you source it from, that'll be your support, not me. Nothing against gaming. I'm just trying to stay alive in this economy, trying to keep the business running. And so what we need to do in order to do something with this build is pull the CPU out. That's a 3900X. We'll put it on a shelf somewhere. It'll be decoration. We're going to replace it with the 5700G. We've already got RAM and storage and an operating system on here. However, the Windows 11 Pro that we've activated may notice that this is a significant hardware change and require us to buy a new product key. Even all added up, it's still cheaper than buying a graphics card. Then on top of that, we're going to put this in a case. Now I have a brand new GAMDIAS. Let me show you what we're going to use today. Looking for a relatively inexpensive case, and Amazon has the GAMDIAS Apollo E2, which is under $70. And it is a hot dog case, but let's take a look at it just the same. Here we go. So it's got very large 200mm fans up in the front, ARGB. The glass door on the side. The first one of these we got, the glass was completely shattered and we had to send it back, but thankfully we ordered it from Amazon. So that was no issue other than just delaying when we could do this video. The replacement case also arrived in a damaged box. However, it looks like it's in good shape. So the plan is we'll put this motherboard that we've already prepped with RAM and storage in Windows 11 Pro, swap out the CPU, put the CPU on the old 3900X on a shelf somewhere, and we'll use this case. I'll use one of my, 550 watt power supplies or something, slap it in there. And we'll get it built today, and then that way, with it all built, we can move it over to Studio C. We're getting closer and closer to wrapping up Studio C, and so if there is a disruption in our normal broadcast schedule for the month of August, please understand that we are trying to get everything moved over there, and it is a bit of a hassle just because I'm just taking it over one carload at a time versus loading up a big box truck and doing it in one trip, doing it just a little at a time. It's August. It's the worst month to visit Phoenix. It's hot. It's humid. And so moving it a little bit at a time is much easier on me. It's a lot cheaper, and we're not ready yet for the studio to have stuff moved into. A lot of the space we're taking up right now during renovations, and then once all the renovation equipment and stuff is moved back and out, then I'll have space for my stuff, which justifies, again, just moving a little at a time. But there is going to be a big push at the end. Now, here is the 5700G we're using today. It's $163. It includes a cooler and has built-in graphics. The processor we're taking out, ironically, is nearly twice the amount of money. Well, at least $100 more anyway, I should say. $200 more. And it's a Ryzen 9 3900X. I don't know why this cooler is, I don't know why this CPU is so much more money than the other one, given how old it is, but it is what it is. I mean, that's what they sell for. And then finally, the motherboard we've got on this is a Prime X570 Pro. I don't remember where this motherboard came from, but I don't seem to have the motherboard box for it. And you'll see this is a Newegg link here because I can't find it on Amazon anymore. I don't know if ASUS simply doesn't make this anymore. Importantly, though, the motherboard does have DisplayPort and video port out. They just don't work with a 3900X. So all the more reason. You know, the 3900X should probably be paired with a motherboard that doesn't offer those video outputs to avoid a support call when your customer plugs their monitor into the wrong port that's not hooked up to anything. And they may not do it right away, but anytime they move the computer or clean and for any reason unplug and replug, they will almost always plug it back into the motherboard instead of the graphics card. And it results in a completely unnecessary and avoidable support call, which eats into whatever little profit I would have made in selling the system. So we're right back around to just trying to stay in business and finding a sustainable means to have happy customers and as many customers as possible by not spending too much of our time with any one customer. So that's the idea behind today's build. And let me get back over to camera one here right quick. All these links are in the video notes below the video. And let's see what you guys are saying in the chat as I'm trying to hit the ground running on today's video here. I apologize. I'm jumping right to it. David Graham saying hello. And yes, there were Windows updates today. That is correct. John Williams saying hello. There's Luke Greenia. And Scott says hello. Peter VZ and Doman 2000 and Brad Revel say hello. There's Mark Baggett. There's also Mateus W1990 says, has Carey addressed recent Intel mess? There's an Intel mess, an AMD mess, and an NVIDIA mess. So if you tell me you're focused only on Intel, that's all I need to know about you and your bias. You obviously like AMD. AMD's having a very big issue on their hands. Intel's having a very big issue on their hands. And NVIDIA is also having a very big issue on their hands. So with regards to Intel, a microcode BIOS update, a microcode update via BIOS update should be available if you have a 13th or 14th gen Intel chip. 13th and 14th gen Intel chips are really just 13th gen Intel chips. We talked about this months ago. We said, if you're going to buy a 14th gen chip, it's not really a 14th gen chip. Usually the generation between Intel chips signifies a difference in production and manufacturing, a reduction in the nanometers or the structure in which they lay out the lithography. So this is the only time Intel's ever done this, where normally when you take a certain generation of chip, say any generation, 13th gen, and you want to sort of spit polish it, get a little more performance out of it, they call that a KS. K like kite, S like Sam. And those are always limited edition, very hot running chips. The new node process that Intel was supposed to be manufacturing 14th gen on wasn't ready in time. But they've got investors, and the investors pressure them to come out with new products, or the investors might take their money. If the investors take their money, Intel has no company anymore. If everybody bails out, Intel's using investors' money to finance their operation. And when Intel makes a profit, they share the profits with the investors in the form of dividends. We do that a little bit here in the sense that we depend on our viewers to support us financially. If the viewers are only viewing, they're only taking, and they're not giving anything back, We cannot sustain the channel if we don't have enough contributors to finance everything we're doing here. None of the parts you see before you were provided to us for free. We've purchased all of this for your educational and entertainment value. There's really nothing in it for me other than I enjoy what I do and I'm able to do this. That's what's in it for me. That's it. There is a certain amount of my own investment that goes into this and a certain amount where I run out of money. And when I'm done, then this channel will just be me sitting in a chair talking. We won't have any more product because there won't be, aside from a company that sends us something free to review, I will not take on corporate sponsorships and I will not take on private investors. So because Intel takes on private investors, they're responsible to answer to them, whether it's right or it's wrong. So when Intel didn't have the 14th node ready, someone got the bright idea to take the 13th node, spit shine it a little bit, get a little bit more out of it, and call it the 14th gen. The 12th gen was a different node. The 11th gen was a different node. The 10th gen was a different node. Every gen was a different node, except 13. Intel has never, ever done this before. So now there's a problem with the 13th, which also means there's a problem with the 14th because there's no such thing as a 14th gen Intel chip. There's no new node. The 14th gen chip is a 13th gen KS processor, essentially, the whole lineup. It's the biggest deception ever. Now, AMD has kind of pulled some stunts as well. AMD's struggled with manufacturing process. AMD removing Gen 4 out of their 8000 series line. Even the 9000 series line is just underwhelming, along with their manufacturing issues. And then we've got NVIDIA also having manufacturing issues. So this is what some people are calling or presuming a result of the pandemic. When these chips, here's the theory. When the engineers sat down to design these chips and the people working in the fabs were designing the nodes, we were in the midst of a pandemic. This is all done years ago. And it ramps up for production. They finally released the production, and probably by then the pandemic was at its end. But all of that work was done during the pandemic. So there may have been some impact the pandemic had on the quality of work that was being done by the employees, given how we were living at that time and the stresses that were placed on our lives, not only at work, but outside of work. And that a lot of companies are now suffering bad products that are just now being made or have been made in this last year that aren't up to the normal standards we expect. And it's not just Intel. So getting back to Intel, there is a microcode that Intel has released, and I don't know a single customer who's impacted by it, not one. I keep hearing about people online complaining, but I've never met one in real life. I've never seen a bad Intel processor that's a 13th or 14th gen impacted by this. And until I do, I don't think this is as big of a deal as people are making it out to be, until I see evidence otherwise. Reading articles online, so what? I don't know how many people are jumping on a bandwagon. I don't know how many people don't know what they're doing and they're blaming their errors on Intel. And I don't know how many are legitimate complaints. We know the theory. Theory is all well and good. We have research, but what I don't have is a physical failing chip for me to test. No matter how many I buy, I cannot get any of them to fail. Do any of you have a failed Intel chip? And the reason I ask is because if you don't, what do you care? In other words, if there's some portion of people out there having a problem with their chip, what are you doing if you're not one of them? Just jumping on the bandwagon to be a social justice warrior? Or are you actually impacted? Or have those people reach out to you and asked you specifically for your help? Because otherwise, my opinion is if it doesn't affect you and you're not impacted by it, stay in your own lane and get out of the way. There's too much of this going online where people are getting involved in things that's none of their business, in the sense that there are impacted people here. But with all these other people not impacted jumping on board, it's really hard to determine how big or how small the people making the noise are. There's a very few people that can sound like a big crowd online, when in fact it's just a handful of people uh, you know, basically bot mobbing the whole thing. So the whole point I'm trying to make is, as I run a business, I don't run my business based on what might happen. Can you come over here? Can you come? Hi, Carey. This is your customer. Can you come over to my place and see if we have any problems? No, no, I can't. Or yes, I can, but I'm going to charge you $125 an hour. You want to pay me $125 an hour to look for problems? I'll find some if you want me to. But if you can't tell me what your problem is, then there's nothing for me to fix. Try going to a doctor sometime and saying you're afraid to get sick and see what the doctor prescribes you. Good luck with that. So when we have an actual problem, we handle it. And if I'm seeing this problem, I'll share it with you. But right now, I'm a big believer, as I always have been, in getting the latest BIOS so you avoid having whatever problem that BIOS update fixes. So if you have a 13th or 14th gen or any generation Intel or AMD chip, it is always my recommendation you get the latest BIOS for it, unless in the case of AMD, your BIOS update invalidates your CPU, which again is another AMD issue going back to AM4. So there is no one good guy here. Apple's got issues as well. So this isn't strictly an Intel issue. The particular issue is Intel's, but there are other issues going on right now with AMD, Apple, NVIDIA. It's just how the world is right now. So my opinion is, when I actually see one of these things on my desk and we can test it, I'll have an opinion. But for right now, just listening to other people talk about their problems, those are their problems. They're not my problems. And unless they're your problems, it's not really any of your concern. But nonetheless, I would still always update to the latest BIOS regardless. But remember, 13th and 14th gen are the same chip. So anything that affects one affects the other one. Intel never did this before. They'll probably never do it again. The 15th gen will be a different node, and that means all of the unique issues with this particular node go away because we're changing the node. So this is only an issue with 13th and 14th gen. And I hate saying 14th gen because it's a lie. There was never a 14th gen. I said that back before 14th gen came out. I said this is a lie. That is not a different generation. That is still a 13th gen chip with a different name on it. So other than that, I'm still waiting to see a bad Intel chip. I haven't seen one. I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm saying I cannot achieve my own opinion based on the conjecture of the internet. I need evidence. If you can't provide the evidence, I'm not interested. By evidence, I mean in front of me so I can touch it and I can see what's going on with it. I'm not denying there's a problem. I am concerned about how inflated this problem is. I think it's a very tiny problem affecting a very tiny but loud portion of customers. I could be wrong. Until I see one, I have no reason to believe that this is a widespread problem because I haven't experienced it, and we built quite a few of those 13th and 14th gen chips. So that's, you asked for my opinion on it, and you may not like it, but I got a business to run, and I don't run it on conjecture. I run it on fixing real problems that actual people have that interact with me, and I have the products I can work on, not somebody else. I don't care what anybody else says. That has no impact on me making the bills at the end of the month or the happiness of my clients. That's why. Not a hobbyist. I'm not an enthusiast. I have work to do. I have a business to run. And I don't have time to sit around and daydream all day about imaginary problems or other people's problems, unless they're paying me. Or unless it's my problem. If it ain't my problem, not my problem. All right. Thomas MacT said Height has a case with an included riser cable on sale. Yeah, but remember what I said about having the riser cable. It blocks access to all the other ports. Did you forget I said that? I know that there are cases that include the riser cable. I didn't know any. So I guess it's good to know Height has one. I personally am not a fan of the Height cases. I think they're way too wide. But good to know just the same. I appreciate the information, even though I don't personally have any interest in building in one. Luke Greenia says, I think every company in existence has some kind of issue to deal with. It's life. Every person, forget every company, every person has stuff to deal with. David Graham says, I hope you never see a bad chip. I kind of hope I do, David, and that's because until I see one, I can't really understand what's going on. And I understand that people looking at the chips are finding different reasons for failures. And you have to understand how many things are at play, from RAM to motherboards to the chip itself and the socket and heat and voltage. So they're not finding any one particular cause for this issue. They're finding a number of causes that could potentially cause the issue, but we don't know how many people are impacted by the issue. What I'm recommending to you is don't get swept up in the hype, because for all you know, it's 5 people manipulating the internet trying to make this out to be bigger than it really is. That's an exaggeration. The point is, if Intel sells, let's say 100% of their chips are 13th and 14th gen, what percentage of that 100% come back for warranty or instability issues? Anybody want to guess what the percentage is? I don't have the numbers, but I think it's under 3%. At the most. So 97 times out of 100 that you buy an Intel 13th or 14th gen chip, you're going to be fine. It's just those 3 out of that 100. This is my conjecture based on what I'm seeing, because I haven't seen a bad one yet. I don't know what else to tell you. So till I see one, you know, it could be Bigfoot, could be Loch Ness Monster. I haven't seen it. So if other people want to tell me they've seen it, okay, but that doesn't change my perspective and my belief. I'll believe it when I actually see it, not when you see it. Actually, I know you guys, so if you guys see it, or you let me know, but don't tell me you saw it from somebody else, because then we're getting into hearsay. All right. El Perez wants to know, is the channel membership auto-renewed? I don't know. I think it is. I think it is. David Graham is reporting what somebody else is saying, so that's hearsay. So again, I'm not interested in you telling me what somebody else has told me, because what they said is hearsay. So that's just going down. This is the worst possible kind of conversation you can bring to me, is telling me what somebody else said. If you yourself have not experienced it, I'm not interested in what anybody else has said, unless there is an official statement from the manufacturer acknowledging the issue. Anybody else may be biased, may be misinterpreting the information, and may not have all of the information, right? And they choose to skew it in the direction that they want to bring their video or their content in order to generate clicks. I'm not saying that's what's happening, but I can't guarantee it's not until I see it. So please do not tell me what somebody else said. You want to get that somebody else on here, we'll talk to them. But if you yourself are not experiencing it, it has no impact on you. And therefore, any information I provide does not impact you one way or the other, because you don't have one, or you have one and you're not impacted by it, negating the entire necessity of having this entire conversation. It is a pointless waste of time unless you are a victim or you are affected. That's all I'm trying to do, is actually get actual problems fixed. And I don't have time for the imaginary ones, and I don't have time for other people's problems, because unless I'm getting paid, I have a stream of work waiting for me that's actually here, that's actually on my desk, and that I'm actually making money from, so I can keep making content and I can keep my business up and running. Anyway, that's why I'm so stern on this, because it's just gossip. All you guys doing are gossiping, and I just don't have time for it. Not all of you, but you know. The internet is what I'm referring to. The internet is just full of gossipers. Back when I was growing up, gossiping was a thing as a stereotype of being a housewife. I don't want to be a stereotype of a housewife. I'll be a house husband. It's just times have changed from when I was growing up. Men didn't gossip. All right. There's a little, might be politically incorrect, but that's how it was in the 70s and the 80s. All right. Anyway, let's see. I think we're caught up today. Yeah. Yeah. Thomas MacT says, I thought you'd be busy with Studio C. Yes, we are busy with Studio C. Work is being done there as we speak, but I can't do work while other work is being done or we get in each other's way. So one person has to finish before the next person can come in. Otherwise, we're just, both of us are slowing down what we need to do. So, but we're doing it as quick as we can, but we also want to make sure we're doing it right the first time. Okay, so looking at the board, this is our, I made my notes, ASUS Prime X570 Pro. We've got 2 sticks of Guile RAM that I just had laying around. They're 8 gigs each for a total of 16 gigs in dual channel mode. We have an Intel 1 terabyte NVMe drive, I guess under here. We have Windows 11 Pro activated. This is not the cooler that should be on a 3900X. In fact, if the 3900X came with a cooler, it was probably the Wraith cooler with the RGB around it, I think. Either way, it's coming out. We're using with everything that's in this box instead. Okay, so let me go ahead and get this cooler removed and let's get the CPU out of it. So one of the things I don't like about AMD CPUs, especially these AM4 CPUs, is they still use the old school pins from the 90s rather than the landings that Intel CPUs use. And what that means is that when we go to pull the cooler off, if it's really stuck on top of the CPU, and any AMD owner can attest to this, you can rip the CPU right out of its socket. That doesn't happen with Intel chips. I think the Zen 5 chips are using the regular land grid array versus pin grid array. But it's so annoying to listen to people praise AMD where they're still making chips using a very old technology it's just not the most user-friendly with regards to getting them removed. Not the biggest deal in the world, but definitely something we should have moved past from. Intel moved past from it. You can see the back plate's out, so I've obviously got everything unscrewed. So what I have to do to get this off without ripping the CPU right out of the socket is kind of wiggle left and right and pull. And we were successful, and the chip has stayed in the socket. Oh, that makes me nervous every time. It's never a problem with Intel. That'll never be an issue, but here we are. And look, every chip's got its pros and its cons. I am not anti-AMD. I might sound like it. There are certain things about Intel chips I don't like, and there are certain things about AMD chips I don't like. We're working on AMD today, so as I'm having to deal with some of the stuff I don't like, I'm going to mention it to you, and I'm going to tell you why. I didn't just wake up, decided, I don't like this. This has been a struggle that anybody who's had to deal with it and has damaged a chip as a result can attest to. Again, you might work on one computer. I'm working on hundreds. So the opportunity to damage that, every time one comes in, here's another opportunity to do it again. And if I break it, I bought it. So then I owe my customer potentially a new CPU. Now in this case, we're not using the CPU. It's more or less going to go to be decoration. It still doesn't mean it's okay to damage it. All right. I'm just grabbing some paper towels to get that extra thermal compound off. And then we can put the CPU and the heatsink away. It's all going to have to get moved over to Studio C. And we want to move it in such a way that we're not going to damage it in the move, and we're not going to lose it in the move. So moving little parts like this kind of sucks because there's so much opportunity for damage and, you know, during the move, and then misplacing it and not knowing where the heck it is once you get there. So I will do my best to have a system where those two items will be moved over to the studio and placed somewhere where they won't be lost and forgotten forever. Let's see. Ron Varnish joining us says hello. Essential Working Too Hard says hello. Shamim Kajviras. Mark Gaines, Andy Kane, and Dan Nilsson all say hello. Welcome in, guys. Time to open the new chip. Let's see what we got. Okay, there's our new chip. Documentation that nobody ever reads. And a teeny tiny little cooler compared to that one. Yeah, it's kind of a difference there. But this chip just doesn't require that big of a cooler. We could keep the larger cooler on there if we wanted to, but the manufacturers include what's needed to keep you under warranty. So if you want to go above and beyond that at your expense, you certainly can spend money. It's your money to spend. Again, I can't emphasize enough, I'm building hundreds of computers. If I spend just $2 more, it adds up, $2 more per PC, that adds up to hundreds, if not thousands of dollars more money, plus the additional work. So I try to keep things very practical, very simple, without any degradation in performance, but an absolute solid reliability, solid security. And there's one I'm missing: security, reliability, performance, solid performance. All those things combined for the best value for the dollar. We're not looking for the best performance at any price. I'm not interested in that. I'm also not looking at building something at the cheapest price that's going to be obsolete in 6 months. That's not doing anybody any favors. You know, oh, here, I brought you a pandemic. You're welcome. Just because it's a gift doesn't mean it's a welcome gift. So when building something for somebody, I want to make sure it's going to last them a long time, not just for 6 months. Yeah, so they're spending their money. I want to make sure that they are getting a great value without getting taken to the cleaners with overpriced hardware that they won't even notice a difference in reality, other than benchmarks. Does it make any sense? If people insist on wanting to spend that kind of money, I'll take it. But very rarely when I point that out to a client, do they ever say, oh, no, I really, really want to spend the extra money. It's happened, but it's pretty rare. I'm a terrible salesman. I will do my best to talk them out of it. Okay, your chip is in. We've got our Go Faster sticker right here. Oh, there's two Go Faster stickers. Got a Radeon and a Ryzen. Yeah, we better keep those. If we want to get the best performance, we got to put the stickers out. Now, thankfully, these coolers, they screw down, so we don't have to deal with the little plastic clips. I hate those. And there is pre-applied thermal compound here. And that's a brand new chip, so there's nothing I have to clean. I just have to orient the cooler which can go on one of two ways. It either goes on with the AMD logo towards the RAM or the AMD logo towards the I/O shield. And the problem, the way this AMD logo, this is another one of my pet peeves with AMD. I don't know what genius at AMD decided to do this completely unnecessary bulge on the back of the cooler here. But you would have what would be a pretty nice looking, perfectly round cooler. But when you add this bulge to it, and this is something only AMD does, nobody else does this, and there's nothing you can do about it other than go to a third-party cooler. But when they do that, it can block one of your RAM sockets on some motherboards. Why would AMD do that to their customers, and why would their customers praise them? But regardless, this is one of those things you got to think about only on an AMD build using an AMD cooler. And what I'll usually do is I'll turn that lump so that it's over the I/O shield so it doesn't block our RAM. Now on this motherboard, I think we'd be okay with it either way. Oh, it's off. No, it won't be. That absolutely covers our RAM socket. I want to show you. I'm not making this up. I'm not being biased. I'm giving you facts, okay? And they're facts I don't like. These are facts. That little bulge that is completely unnecessary is covering up that fourth RAM socket. Now, if you had RGB RAM, that would be covering up your RGB as well, negating the extra price you paid for it, if you could even get it down underneath that. Do you know who doesn't build coolers like this? Literally everyone, every manufacturer, except AMD. Now, couldn't they have moved that logo up here? They could have. Are there videos showing you how to turn it by potentially breaking it? There are. But why is it out of the factory? It just doesn't fit correctly. So we have to turn this so that nut, that lump, is facing our heatsink on this side. And I also need to put the little metal back plate on there. So again, when I'm dealing with builds from any manufacturer, I have no loyalty to either Intel or AMD. My loyalty is to my customers, to give them the best value, the best systems at the best prices with the best performance, security, and reliability. Because my customers are buying systems from me. They're not buying from Intel and they're not buying from AMD. What they're buying is a system from Carey. This represents me. So I'm going to be very finicky over what I associate my name with. And when I run into issues, I'm going to tell you, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. Even with this right here, where at least we can get the RAM in there. Right, I can get a finger in there. But that's awfully tight. You'll never see me have this problem on a stock Intel CPU. Never have. Not going back in the history of the chip, there's no precedence for AMD to do this. And it upsets me because it didn't have to be like this. It also upsets me to see blind loyalty to a company that, you know, whether you're team red, team blue, team green, whatever, it's preposterous to me. No one company is good all the time. In tech, one company will be good for a while, then the other company will be better. Then that company will be better for a while, then the other company will beat them. And so to cut off your nose to spite your face, to stay true to a particular team that doesn't even know you exist and could care less if you bought their product or not, seems like a silly thing to get behind. Seems like a weird hill that you'd want to die on. But, you know, I'm going to build what my customers want to pay for. So money talks. When customers want to pay for a system, I'm happy to build whatever they want, and I will always try to guide them with advice to a sound investment that will meet their or exceed their needs. And if a customer insists they want me to build something unreliable, I will refuse, because that's a reflection of the quality of work I do. So when somebody comes over, says, wow, your computer's a piece of crap, who built that? Oh, this guy, CareyHolzman. Oof. I'd never buy a computer from that guy. So even if the customer says, I'm going to pay you for it, there are some builds I simply will not do because I'm afraid of the consequences of how that makes me look. I've had a customer that wanted me to build a very complex system for their future needs. And I said, look, you should really just wait until you need it. And he goes, yeah, but I'm the customer. Aren't I always right? I go, nope. Nope, try that with a doctor sometime. Go to a doctor's office and tell them to prescribe you some painkillers and specify how many you want, what dosage you want, and what strength. Just a random doctor. See if they write that prescription. They're not going to, because it's a reflection on the doctor and they can lose their medical license as a result of that. So I have kind of a similar situation where, because I don't do a lot of advertising and I'm not the size of Best Buy, every customer is important to me. At Best Buy, every customer is not important. They're going to deal with, 2,000 customers a day at one store. So unless you're a regular and you spend a lot on a regular basis and they know you, they're probably just not going to have time. Too many other people to help. It's just the economics of it. But me, a very small business, every customer is important. And if I feel a customer is going to be demanding by telling me what I'm going to do, it sounds like they should probably build it themselves. I don't have time for any one customer to monopolize me. It's just, I'll go out of business. It's not a question of what I want to do. It's what I have to do. All right, let's see. Which one of these plugs is the CPU socket? This one. All right, now that CPU has been replaced, and we can grab our power supply and fire this bad boy up. I suspect my Windows activation is going to get broken, but we'll see. Now, as far as I'm concerned, you can put me in front of an AMD build or an Intel build and tell me I'm not allowed to look at any specs. I'm allowed to load things like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, browse the web, bring up the email, run my video editor, and then ask me to tell you, am I on an Intel or an AMD system? There's no way myself or anybody else can tell you that. The chips are very similar. It's like putting me in a car and saying, am I driving a Toyota, a Honda, a Nissan, a Ford, or a Chevy? If I'm in the passenger seat just with blindfolds and somebody else is driving the car and I can listen to the engine and I can feel the seats and I can feel the outside of the car, they almost all look alike with regards to like sedans or even SUVs. They all kind of run the same. They all have about the same acceleration unless you go extreme on the expense. It'd be very, very difficult for me to tell you what the make and model of the car is if I was blindfolded and wasn't driving. And, as a passenger, feeling the car drive, listening to it drive, feeling the suspension, feeling the acceleration, there'd no way to know. They're all very similar. Okay, so with the power supply hooked up, let's grab HDMI and network. So I can finally use the built-in HDMI ports on this motherboard that I wasn't able to use when I didn't have a built-in graphics on my CPU with that 3900X. And then I need a keyboard and a mouse, so we'll grab that from over here. How many of you have a 13th or 14th gen Intel chip on the rig you're using right now to watch these videos? Just as an informal survey, kind of curious. Oh, I need a power switch, don't I? Anybody in the chat running a 13th or 14th gen Intel chip that you were watching these videos on? Okay, turn the power supply on. Turn this on. CPU fan is spinning. Let's come around to our HDMI input. HDMI. Hopefully we'll post here. Shamim Kajvera says, I have a 13th gen Intel i5 13500 in my new build. Patrick Manny says he's got a 13700K. Now, Shamim or Patrick, are you experiencing or have you ever experienced any instability problems? Michael Lavelle with a 14700K. So and this question goes to anybody with a 13th or 14th gen. Have you been a victim of what everybody on the internet seems to be talking about? Patrick Manny says, not yet, fingers crossed. Let's go into setup here since it acknowledges we've changed our CPU. We're maybe a new BIOS update to look forward to. BIOS version on this is 5013, and it does see the Ryzen 7 5700G, so that's our new chip working as it should. So we can now save and exit. William's got a 13400F. So Shamim, Michael, and Patrick all say they have not had any problem with their 13th or 14th gen Intel chip. William, have you? Shamim says, don't scare me, Carey. No, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to reassure you that look at all the other people who are running 13th and 14th gen chips that have never had a problem. Uh-oh, what's this say? Can't read it. We detected a new TPM module, which will change the data structure of the storage. That's because the TPM is built into the CPU. Now, if we had BitLocker on this system, we would not be able to reboot without our BitLocker key. So what this is telling you is, hey, you know, a new key will be generated based on the TPM module that's in the CPU that you just changed. So you have to press Y to reset the TPIM or the FTP, it's an F, TPM, the Trusted Platform Module. You need a recovery key if you've enabled BitLocker. But anyway, we should have no BitLocker on this, and this should be irrelevant for us. So I hit yes or Y to let it go ahead, and that could be a little short quick tips video right there. CareyHolzman Technology is a supporter here. Welcome in, CareyHolzman Technology. Chico48 says he's got an i5 13600K. It's no problem, smooth as silk. So again, show me somebody that's affected by this. That's all I'm saying. William says everything's been running fine so far. Barry Klein says he has instability problems, but not related to his computer. There you go. All right. As you can see, that we didn't have BitLocker. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to boot. Now, the only thing I'm curious about is, did we lose our activation because we changed them? The activation is tied to the motherboard, but that could also mean it's tied to the CPU. I'll wait for that little globe down on the corner here to become, there it is. Now we're connected to the internet. Let's go to Windows Update, because if we're going to have an activation issue or reactivation, it'll happen typically during the Windows Update process. Being the second Tuesday of the month, this is the time we get our updates for Windows. And, oh yeah, we got some updates today, didn't we? With regards to activation, we can just type in the word activation down here, bring up activation settings. It kept activation. Very good. So it is, in fact, tied to the motherboard. There's evidence right there. All right, we're going to go ahead and let this update. And in the meantime, what we're going to do next is put this into our case. Now, the case, as I mentioned, is made by GAMDIAS. And GAMDIAS, I think, makes our streamer, if I'm not mistaken. Is that a GAMDIAS? GAMDIAS, they're kind of all over the map with their case designs. Many of them are what I would call hot dog builds. And they look good, but they're not made of the highest quality components. And they're priced, for that reason, much more inexpensively than competitors. So today's case, the Apollo, $66 on Amazon. It's ridiculously cheap. And it's an attractive looking case, but it's a little flimsy, and like the side door only has magnets to keep it closed. There's no screws, there's no clips. So it's very much built to a price point. That doesn't necessarily make it bad. It just depends how fussy you are. So some people, I don't know, I'm trying to find an analogy. Let's say you buy some peanut butter. You got creamy peanut butter, you got crunchy peanut butter, you've got organic peanut butter. Now somebody might not want anything but the organic. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the other two. But the organic's probably going to cost a little bit more. If you don't want to spend that much, then you need to not require organic, or you need to sacrifice something in your cart to make up for the price difference if it's that important to you. Whether or not you buy the smooth peanut butter or the crunchy peanut butter is a personal, subjective opinion, and you decide what you like. It has no impact on anybody else in the world except you. So when we showcase computer cases here on the channel, there are cases where I will tell you I would not sell this to a customer. I'll make a video with it, and I'll give you all the reasons why I will not sell this to a customer. Remember, I'm the one that it's a reflection of me. If there's problems with it, if it's flimsy, if it dents easily, if it's difficult to work on, that all eats into my time. It costs me money. It's inconvenient for the customer that things take longer. It might look great, but I don't want my name associated with it for a representation of the kind of work I do, nor do I want the responsibility of being the one that has to work on it in a timely manner and still be able to make a profit at the end of the day. So if it's a machine that's being built that nobody's going to open up and it's just going to stay left alone, and assuming all the parts continue to be reliable, it's fine. You get a good value. If it's something you're building for yourself and you don't mind going through extra effort because it's just fun for you, and your livelihood and career and ability to pay your bills are not resting on your ability to get it done quickly because you have 50 more to do. Somehow you're supposed to get through that in a week. You're not going to get through 10 a day. There's no way. So what that is your ship is taking on water and it's going to sink, and you're not going to be captain of a ship anymore. So we have to keep the ship afloat. We have to control as much as possible what our risks are. And that ensures that when I take on a customer, that customer's expectations for price and performance, reliability, all of that's going to be met or exceeded for how much it's going to cost and what time it's going to be delivered. If I fail that, then I'm the one who screwed up because I'm the one who set the expectations, right? So if I say, well, this is going to be super inexpensive, and then it takes me longer to build it, doesn't work. If it's a lot of money and then the customer realizes they could have bought something similar for a couple $100 less, they'll probably give me an earful. You ripped me off. You took advantage of me. So somewhere in between those two, there's a line right down the middle. And it's a pretty big line, but it's all about being practical. It's about building something that'll last a long time, that won't be too expensive, it won't be too cheap. It's going to perform so close to the more expensive models, very few people could tell the difference. It'll be quiet. And if I ever have to work on it or anybody else has to work on it, they can get in and out quickly. See how we're doing on our updates. Oh, we got this big cumulative update, but we can restart now anyway. And we'll just get that, screen with white text that your computer's updating. Don't shut it off. Yeah. Updates are underway. Please keep your computer on. Please keep your arms and legs inside the vehicle at all times. All right, well, we're waiting on this. Let me go back over here to camera one, and I can put myself in a corner. Keep an eye on that. I'm glad it kept its activation. However, even if it didn't, it's not that expensive, about $16 to just go buy a Windows 10 Pro product key from our friends at VIP CDK Deals, and then use the Windows 10 product key to activate Windows 11. Both Windows 10 product keys work on Windows 10 installs, and they work on Windows 11 installs. As long as you're going from Windows 10 Pro to Windows 11 Pro, or Windows 10 Home, Windows 11 Home. You cannot mix them. It's to be the same Pro or Home version that you've got the key for. It only saves you a couple bucks. But the point is, if you're building 100 computers, a couple of bucks is a couple $100. Luke Greeny has said that cooler did the exact same thing to the Project Zero board. Yeah, that'll give you a heart attack, right? Because when the cooler comes out, if it rips the CPU out of the socket, I hope you pulled it out straight, because otherwise you could have bent pins or broken pins. But it sounds like you did okay. Andy Kane wants to know if I've ever seen a bad AMD chip over the years. Bad CPUs overall are pretty uncommon. But if you look at the repair videos we've done here on the channel, we get more AMDs in for repair than we get Intel. Now, is that because more home users buy the AMD brand? I mean, I really don't know. In most cases, it's the motherboards and not the CPUs that go bad. But yes, AMD has had a series of bad chips. I don't know where you've been, but they've had nothing but bad chips as they introduced the Ryzen line and the Threadripper. If you go back and watch our Threadripper build, that took 2 years before we got everything worked out of it. So was it a bad chip? It's hard to say with all the BIOS updates how much microcode was adjusted, like what Intel's doing now on the 13th and 14th gen. AMD also had to do that. Plus the security issues. AMD has a security issue in their chip that goes way back. The good news is it's highly unlikely anybody could ever, the circumstances you have to be under to take advantage of it are a bit wild. But researchers have shown it and proven it. There is not one perfect chip. I mean, if you want to believe that, I'm sorry if I'm telling you there's no such thing as Santa Claus and nobody's told you that. AMD is not Santa Claus. Intel isn't either. So yes, I have seen a similar situation with AMD, especially when they first introduced Ryzen and Threadripper. They were a nightmare. They weren't running at advertised speeds. They had an issue with them running hot. They had an issue with RAM compatibility. Big issue with RAM compatibility. They have issues right now where brand new AMD systems aren't restarting. There's an issue there. As far as I know, it's ongoing. You can Google it if you want more information. There's no single brand that I'm aware of chip manufacturer that doesn't have some ongoing issue. And then it's just really the depth, is that something that would affect me? And that's what I'm asking you guys, is how many of you are affected? Because just because a few people are affected, a few people die on an airplane, does that mean you're not going to fly anymore? Does that mean everybody that flies on an airplane dies on an airplane? But those are the only ones that die are the ones you hear about. All the millions of people that fly safely every day whisper quiet. Even if it's not millions, it's hundreds of thousands, I'm sure. All right, let's take a look here. Back over to Windows Update. update. Back over to the, oh, I guess it finished it. All right. I thought that cumulative update was going on, but this is something else. So this shouldn't take too long. Gary Tatum says he's going to start using Cyrix. Yeah. Sun workstations. How about that? Yeah, there's a reboot issue with back into gossip again. AMD reboot. Since some AMD Radeon users have experienced issues with rebooting their PCs since the release of Adrenalin 23.2.1. That's not what I'm looking for. AMD won't post unless BIOS is reset. I think it's the 7000 series. Pretty sure. And again, you're going to see just hordes of people apparently complaining about it. But how many people are actually affected by it? I don't know. Enough to create a Reddit thread. Big one. But retry all. Okay, I'm going to say that looks good and up to date, and so we can shut it all down and put it in the case. And I think we'll go ahead and use this power supply we have out already, and we'll slap it in the case just to get this done faster. That'll be my plan. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is turn the power supply off, then unplug it. HDMI cable and network cable. Switch can go put away. And let me step around so I can get the power supply power cables unplugged. So our big 24 pin right here. And motherboard power here. And I'll just go ahead and remove the dongle for the wireless keyboard and mouse just to get it out of the way. So we do a nice clean install in a standard way and go for consistency every time. Even if you think to yourself, well, it's already in there, I can leave it in. It's just not a good habit. In my opinion, always do things consistently the same and you'll get really fast at it, and your quality, the likelihood of the build starting the first time you push the power button will be greater if you always do it the same way. It's no different than learning how to play a song. You have to, sit at the guitar, piano, whatever instrument, the drums, and you have to practice, 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 and you always have to play it, the same way, in the sense that you're trying to achieve a level of rhythm and timing throughout the entirety of that song. In much the same way, the same is true here, that we want to work consistently the same. And as we do more and more of it, we should build a rhythm, and that rhythm should result in a reliable and expected outcome every single time. But the minute you start improvising, you start throwing variables in, and it might work for you and it might not. So I got the zip tie off of my loop here. Put that back on. I hate it when I do that and then I close the zip tie down. It's on nothing. It's just a waste of a zip tie. Not my biggest problem in the world, but still one. I prefer to avoid problems in general. David Graham says, I missed his super chat. Ah, thank you, David. Thank you for making me aware. David Graham with a $2 super chat said, a penny saved is a penny earned. Here's 200 pennies. Well, thank you, David. You know, YouTube's going to take 30 of those pennies, but I do appreciate it. That was 200. I'll get 170. No, that's not right. 30% of $2, 60 cents. So I get 140. All right. Darn you, YouTube. Let's get the case out and we're ready to start building, or, you know, putting the motherboard into the case. We know the motherboard's got Windows, drivers, activation. We know our power supply is good. We know the new CPU is working as it should. Everything is bang on perfect. We'll bring out the Lazy Susan. And I'll grab the case, which I have unboxed over here. Now, one thing you're going to find on these inexpensive hot dog cases is not only are they more limited with regards to cable management, generally speaking, the fans may just run at one speed at all times. It looks like the rear case fan is completely black. That indicates no RGB. The two fans up front are clear. That indicates these are both RGB. That means we need power and RGB, power and RGB. That's 4 additional cables. And then if you look at the top, something inexpensive cases do is they take your front port USB on your motherboard that gives you 2, and they throw one into the trash can for no apparent reason and just give you 1. You can't get the other one back. If you activate this USB port, you have lost the second USB port. Why? Because if they added another one, it might cost 50 cents. But they do give you the 2 full USB 2s. Every time you plug a connector that's from USB inside of your case onto your motherboard, that connector powers 2 USB ports on the motherboard. So if you plug a cable into your motherboard for USB, USB 2, USB 3, that cable is carrying inside of it 2 USB ports. Now, if the other end of the cable only ends in 1, where'd the other one go? It took the whole connector. So if your motherboard claims to have a certain number of ports available, assuming you're using the USB ports on the motherboard, the headers to go on the case, or if you had an external bay, that's a precious USB 3. I wouldn't be as upset if it was just one USB 2. But to give us just, think about this for a minute. The cable that runs from this connector onto our motherboard, the same cable. There's no cost differential in the cable. The solder and the circuit board that all of these ports are attached to, it's already there. So your only cost as a manufacturer is this little square, this little metal square port that needs to be soldered down onto the circuit board. Circuit board doesn't need to be any bigger. You're going to make another hole in the case. That doesn't cost much of anything. And when you ask, why did you only give me 1 when you took 2? They always say the same thing. It costs too much. If I spent $67 on this case plus sales tax, do you think I'm going to mind spending $2 more? If it's adding $200, different story. So that is often found on cheaper cases, just so you know. Not to say that some more name brand cases don't do that too, but it's far more common on the inexpensive cases. For me, as you can tell, I'm kind of pissed off about it because I will gladly use a USB 3 port before a USB 2 port every time. But if I only have one up on the front, that means I got to go to the back of the motherboard to get to the others. Even though the cable that I wired up to this connector had two in it. Anyway, it's just a case manufacturer's choice. And I think it's a bad decision. So anyway, here's our case. This is the GAMDIAS Apollo. And I'm going to open this up. There is no screws or tabs or anything. There's a little pull ring right here if you get your finger up under there. And then you just slip your finger through that pull ring, pull it, and there's just magnets that hold it onto the side of the case. So to work on this, we need to remove this, and this is just going to be lifted off so that we can set it aside. There was plastic all over it. We removed the plastic. And now inside of the case, you can see we've got 7 ports. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's how we know that's a full-size ATX motherboard that can fit in there. If it only had 4, that would be micro ATX only. A full-size ATX board would not fit without these extra slots. So if you're not sure when you're shopping how big the case is, you can at least tell if it's a micro ATX board or a full-size ATX board by just counting the number of slots back here. You want to see 7 if you're going to be installing a full-size ATX motherboard. Let's go ahead and take the other side off of here. And then we'll lay this flat, get the motherboard put in, get our power supply put in, get it hooked up. And then it'll be ready to be hauled over to Studio C. Very simple, just a slot here. It just guides on the top, and it's held in with the screws. So it's kind of a sloppy, lack of, doesn't secure, I guess I want to say, the side panel over there. We've got a 2.5-inch drive bay here. So here's when I talk about the cheap stuff, right? We have a 3-pin fan instead of a 4-pin fan. This can still be controlled to speed up and slow down, but a 4-pin fan can control it with more precision. So a 3-pin fan costs less, and so that's what you get. Over on this side, we've got not a box, but a bag of screws. These are the screws that we need to install the motherboard and any other hardware in this case when we get the wire tie out of there. And in this bag, we have let's see, we have some zip ties and another bag. And this bag is just an assortment of different kinds of screws and things. So good luck. I hope you know what you're doing. Fine threaded, coarse threaded, fan screws, standoffs, all jammed into this one little bag. But hey, at least we got them. Again, it's just something the less expensive cases are going to do everything to cut a corner and shave a penny here, shave a penny there. And those pennies add up. And then the customer says, hey, that case is a really good price, and they buy it. And if they're not experienced, they might get themselves in over their head with, I don't see any instructions. I don't know how this goes together, stuff like that. So, know what you're buying. And that's our goal here today, is to just simply introduce you to the hardware, to explain the difference in price. It's not rocket science. Most of you probably could do this blindfolded. But for anybody watching that's not familiar with computer building, this is probably not the case you want to start with. You could totally do it, but it definitely will be harder work. I'm still trying to remove all the wire ties on this thing. Definitely do not want to leave any of those in here. There's another one. Oh no, that's just the cable, isn't it? And there's another one down here. Weird. And there really isn't much room for cable management back here. So you look at this slew of cables we've got. And once again, this is very common on the less expensive cases. I'm not saying it's a problem. I'm simply stating that you should be prepared for what you're buying so that you don't get in over your head or have buyer's remorse. So we have all of these cables that we're supposed to somehow manage into a space that just fits my fingers. That's how much room we have for cable management. Now we do have this 3.5-inch hard drive tray down here. And if we can take this out, which I think it can come out, then we can jam all our cables under here, which is really nice since we have a power supply shroud, non-removable power supply shroud that we can hide our cables under. On the other hand, if you also want to have what appears to be, looks like it'll hold two 3.5-inch drives. Looks like one inside and one on top. Then you have your power supply over here with your power supply cables. I have no idea where you're supposed to put all these. They didn't really give you any consideration. Now it also appears that you can put, let's see. Looks like you can put another solid state drive over here. It says SSD etched right in. So I guess it would be 2 screws here, 2 screws here. And what you could do, according to the back of the tray, is you would take a solid state drive, screw it in from the back, and you could put one here. You could put one here. And you can go either way. You can put it up this way or put the connectors down. I suppose one would go up and one would go down, and you'd use that hole to run your cables. But then once you get to the other side, there's even more cables than this. Now you're adding 2 cables per drive. One of those is a thicker power supply cable. I don't know where those cables are supposed to go. So you could have 2 3.5-inch drives and 3 2.5-inch drives, 1, 2, and 3, but no room to wire any of it. So again, these are the typical consequences of the cheaper or less expensive cases. So whether or not that matters to you, I don't know. I just want you to be aware of it. And then that way, when you're making a purchasing decision, you're doing so fully understanding what you're buying. So let's see, are all of our standoffs in the right place? That's my first question. And it looks like we only have the first 2 rows of standoffs, not the final row. So I hope we have enough standoffs in this bag. I know I saw 1, but it looks like I'm going to need about 3. Inside of the motherboard case, and again, cheaper cases do this. If this was an NZXT case, all of these standoffs would be in there would be 9 of them for a standard ATX motherboard positioned where a standard ATX motherboard would have the screws. We've got 1 here, and then they go straight down, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, but there should be another 1, 2, 3 over here that isn't here. I don't know why. That's standard practice. It should have been, in the sense that they put those 6 standoffs in at the factory. Why didn't they put in the other 3? It's just an inexpensive case thing, right? It costs a little less money to only put in 6. You can put the other three in yourself. I mean, really? Does it really cost that much? If you're only building 1 of these, who cares? If you've got 10 of these to do today and you have to do this to all 10 of them, and I want them done by the end of the day, you aren't going to be a happy technician, let me tell you. I know I have scissors in here. But since we've been moving a lot of items over to Studio C, there's a little disorganization happening here. I don't think I took them. There they are. Just buried. David Graham mentions Amazon a bunch of cheap USB 3.0 splitters. I would never use a USB 3.0 splitter on a machine I'm selling a customer, because when you use those, you could have voltage drops, and that will also result oftentimes in performance degradation. It's also adding to the cost of the computer, and it's adding to the cost of the labor, and that's not going to make the customer happy. So again, as a home user, sitting at home, doing something for yourself, spending your own money and not somebody else's, and being held accountable only to yourself, not having the liability that you would take on if you sold a computer to a customer, eating up the extra cost of labor because the customer won't pay it, just to end up having a support call because the USB port's flaky, is definitely not the way to sell systems to customers if you want to be in business for forever, you know, for your life. If you want to keep that business alive, you can't go too cheap on the parts. It's a reflection on you. And you can't look for Band-Aids on Amazon because it eats up more money and it eats up more time and it reduces your reliability. What you need to do is sell the right parts. You should not need any adapters on new parts. If you do, you're doing it wrong. That's my opinion. Now, there are always exceptions, right? There's always exceptions, but the rule is if it's a brand new build and you did everything correctly, you should not need any adapters. You introduce adapters, you introduce costs, you introduce another failure point, and you introduce more labor. And again, if you're only building one, how much time does it take to put on an adapter? When you're building 10 and you got to get them done by the end of the day, it's just not going to happen. You're just not going to make it. So here's what happens in business. For those of you who've never worked in at a computer facility, you have different departments: tech support department, accounting and payroll, HR. You have your executives. You have your warehouse with inventory. You have your building area where you have your techs, and then you have your repair and diagnostic area, along with a returns area where somebody takes in nothing but returns. And then there's other stuff, but that's the gist of it, you know, in the sales. So the sales department and the people who do the work, they work in different parts of the building. They don't necessarily overhear what's being said, but we end up getting the results where the salesman tells some company, right? They call and go, hey, let's sell you some computers. And the company says, I'm glad you called. We need 50 by next week. Can you get us 50 on today's Monday, Tuesday? Can you get us 50 by Monday? Salesman says, yeah, no problem. And they'll say, okay, at what cost? Salesman will give them a price and negotiate the price, whatever. Then the order goes down to the warehouse to make sure we have the parts. If we don't have the parts, stop everything you're doing and get those parts. If those parts take 2 or 3 days to arrive, and then the people building the machines get the order, you need to get all 50 of these out by the end of the week. And they're saying, we have other orders. Too bad, salesman made the promise. If you don't do it, we'll lose the sale. And around the wheel goes. It's constant high pressure all the time. So you need to be able to assemble machines that you don't need a wide variety of inventory. You need to be able to build them quickly, reliably. You want your customers coming back again and again and again. Okay, so the missing standoffs, we've got one that's going to go right here, far end, I believe. And these standoffs don't even want to turn. The paint is too thick. We've got one going down here. Went in almost halfway before the board stopped, and then we got this one right up here. Now again, on an NZXT or Corsair case, these would already be in here for you. Flip this down, and I need to tighten those little standoffs up. And I have my 5mm driver. Where's it? So dark I can barely see it. You don't want to over tighten the standoffs on the motherboard tray, because if you strip it out, that's your motherboard tray, man. So good luck finding another standoff that'll work. These are pretty much the only ones that are going to work. Okay, so what I've done is I've added 3 standoffs to the far side. So just to show you, there was not a standoff right here before, or here in the middle, or here at the bottom. Those are the 3 that I added. Now let me lay it back down. Let's see if we can get our motherboard seated and make sure that all the standoffs are in the right place. Grab the board. You see how I handle it, grabbing by the plastic shroud of the fan. So if there is a static discharge, it only hits the shroud. Doesn't affect any of the components. We always tried to avoid touching the components for that reason, and then we don't have to wear an anti-static anti-static discharge restraint. Now, if we line that up, now here's another thing. These cases, these less expensive cases, typically don't have the middle standoff with the post that the name brand cases do. So there's nothing holding this motherboard in position. Just gravity and inertia. Or if we had some inertia, it would slide around. Left, right, forward, backward. There's nothing locking it in place, helping us to install it. Not a big deal. It's just, if that doesn't matter to you, you'll be fine with a case like this. If something like that annoys you like it annoys me, you know, you'll obviously make a different decision. So that's all I'm trying to get across to you is what some of these differences on cheaper cases are to the bigger names. And sometimes it's you say, well, these are little things. And I go, I realize they're little things, but the little things take up time. And the less efficient you are, the less money you're making. And the other issue is, you know, having a paper cut isn't really that big of a deal, but having 1,000 paper cuts could kill you. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. I'm trying to figure out which one of these screws is the one for the motherboard. There is no 4th standoff. So usually I'd take a spare standoff and see which screw fits. But we've got hard drive screws, we've got power supply screws, and we have solid state drive screws, but I don't see motherboard screws. So I'm going to guess, and I'm probably going to be wrong, that we're using the solid state drive screws for the motherboard too. So I'm not going to use the electric driver because I don't want to strip out the standoff or ruin the screw. So if I feel this not going in straight or not tightening, I'll know that the fine threaded screw is not right. So I guess I'll start right here in the middle since that's the easiest one to access. Yeah, so it is the solid state drive screws. It's interesting the case manufacturer chose to do that. So now that I know that, I can grab my electric driver and we can get this done a lot quicker. I don't recommend you use an electric driver unless you're very familiar with it. It is very easy to cross thread the screws and then you're not going to be a happy camper. This is about ready to knock everything off the side of my desk. That's all got to get cleared off and moved over to Studio C anyway. That may be my excuse once I pick it up off the floor. Well, might as well put it in a bag or a box and get it over there. And then the next day, I'm like, what'd I do with that? I need it today. You know how that goes. I'm just going to get these screws started. Ooh, that one went all the way in. Okay, with all 9 screws in, I can go ahead and tighten them all down now. Okay, I think I got them all. So our front port umbilicals would be, let's see, what do I have back here? Move that around. Just trying to get some things untangled over here. We've got our USB Type-C cable. And that is going to go where? All the way down at the bottom? We don't have one up here. Interesting. Okay, well, maybe I'm not going to plug that in just yet. Well, I guess. Decisions. So the USB Type-C header is right down at the bottom. Usually there's one over here. Sometimes you get 2. And it wouldn't matter which one we used. But in this case, it looks like we only get 1 on this motherboard. So I don't really have a choice. What I'm thinking is, I've got to put the power supply down here. So do I really want to run this cable right now? Will that make the power supply more difficult to put in? But if I don't run the cable now and put the power supply in first, will that make it more difficult to put the cable in first? These are typically not issues you see with name brand cases. They're more thought out for the builder, with few exceptions, of course. But this is typical of the cheaper cases. And it's, again, if it's okay with you and you don't mind it, it's fine. If it's not okay with you, now you know before buying. Save you the trouble. Okay, so that's our USB 3 header. That's giving us that 1 USB port on top. Well, the plug is giving us 2. Now this, what is this? Yikes. What a mess of cables we've got here. I'm just trying to untangle everything. Now this one here, there it is. This is going to be our front port power switch, reset switch, hard drive LED. Again, we're doing all the front port umbilicals. So I should be able to bring that down. How do I want to do this? This one? Yikes. Wow, this cable is all sort of wound in on itself, which I want to straighten it out because over time it could actually break the cable. It's a pretty thin, fragile cable. That looks like it's coming off of, I don't know what LED that is. Not quite sure. All right, so anyway, if we bring this up, it'll be right about there. Pull that through. And then, let's see, what do we have? Hard drive LED can go first in the bottom row. Now, we do have close-up shots of this in some of our other build videos going back a couple years. None of this has changed over the years. It's all the same. All these little connectors I put on are going in the same place I've been showing you in videos for the last, at least 10 years. Has not changed. Now with a company like NZXT, you just get one connector and you plug it in. You don't have to go through these 4 wires. Again, you pay a little bit more for that case, but then you don't have to go through this hassle. If you're only building one computer, then you're only doing this once, so if it takes a few minutes extra, who cares? Or if you're building your first computer and this makes you nervous, having the one plug is way easier and way more confidence building than doing each one individually. But it's not rocket science. Either way, it's simple. But those are the things that kind of give people anxiety. So, you know, for those people, they should buy a name brand case. They won't have to deal with that. All right, so we do have a SATA power cable here that's going to power what appears to be what does that power? I don't know what this powers. I'm going to guess that those front fans just run full speed at all time. That's what it looks like is going on. They won't speed up or slow down based on the computer temperature. Now this final plug is a USB 2 plug, and that's going to give us 2 USB 2s up here. It's a very different looking plug from the USB 3. And we can use any USB 2 header. They're usually located on the bottom of the board. You often get 2 of them. Doesn't matter which one you use, but effectively this cable will take the same route going above the power supply here. So again, if the power supply is in, it could make installing, you know, in the case of a new build, if you put your power supply in first, that might be a little more difficult. It might not, depends on your patience, your skill, the size of your hands. Smaller hands can get in there a little easier. And of course, the size of the power supply you put in there. We're using a relatively small power supply in this build to keep our costs down. But, you know, you could put a 1500 watt power supply in this bad boy with a RTX 4090 Ti. It would totally be fine. Might be bottlenecking the CPU a bit, but yeah, totally do it. Oh, I have one more connector. This is our front port audio. That's always located in the bottom far corner. So again, I think we're going to follow the same route again as these other 2 cables, because we got to come in through that cable management hole right down there. So let me see if I can get this over there. Yep, that's no problem. And then I need my flashlight to see again and find that connector. I know it's there somewhere. There we go. All right. So now, when we go to install our power supply, I need to make sure that I have a SATA connector on the back of this. This is a EVGA 550GR power supply. It is modular. And I've got the bag of cables. I've just put all the cables in a Ziploc bag. And previously when we were testing the board, we had to put a GPU in it, which required power. I'll put the power cable back in the bag and then take out a SATA cable. This is the bag I was talking about. Let's see. Right on top, SATA cable. Exactly what we needed. And that should be all we need for the build. Should be good to go. Not a difficult case to work on, but just a little bit more time consuming, a little more effort required in exchange for saving a few dollars. So if you want to do your work yourself and save a few dollars, that's great. And if you'd rather have it done for you, you spend a couple bucks more. As with the, you know, cooking at home is generally cheaper than going out to eat. But if this case sold for the same price as a name brand case that did all that for you, I'd tell you, you know, definitely get the name brand. But because this is so much cheaper, it's up to you to determine if it's worth it. Some people, it's purely aesthetics. They don't really care what it's like on the inside. As long as it's got the right look, they'll deal with it. And that's okay too. All right, so to install our power supply, let me come around. Remember, these cables now are going to be in the way. We'll just kind of lift those up. We don't want to pinch any of them. It is a tight fit to get it in there. Fan facing down. Get around that hard drive tray. See how the hard drive tray is hitting our cables. Really no cable management consideration here. So you can see with the cutout that's going to display our power supply information, I can also get my hands in there to help align that power supply to where I need it to be. And then I can either use the screws that came with the case, or I can use the screws that came with the power supply. The screws that came with the power supply, I should have right here. They're black, they do match. They're the exact same screws, so it really doesn't matter. They're a hex head coarse thread screw. That's very common on most computer cases going back to the 1980s. Only now they make them, they're black. Before they used to just be chrome, silver or chrome. So one size fits all deal back in the day. All right, so get that aligned. Power supply had to be picked up a little bit, which was a little tricky to do. I had to grab it by the cables to lift it so that the mounting points would align with the holes. And then we leave the screws loose so we can continue to adjust the power supply's position so all 4 holes line up correctly. We're not cross-threading anything. Screws should go in buttery smooth. Once you get them all started, then you can tighten them down. I'll often just give these a little bit more of a turn just to make sure that power supply is not going to come loose. My torque setting is very low on this driver since I use it for everything. This little eco mode will turn that on, but we'll leave the power supply off for right now. And then we just hook up our power supply cables, and then we'll reboot it, make sure that, or power it on, make sure everything's working like it should. I don't see, let's see, as far as these front fans go, all of this extra cabling is for this RGB stuff. So, or the fans and RGB fans. So let's go, which way do we go with this? Untangle this. I'm gonna drop something, probably a screw. SATA cable. We've got our big motherboard power connector here, which I am trying to weave through all of these cables. What a mess. And we can bring that right up through there. That should be right around, want to be, I'm guessing. Oh yeah, dead on. Just facing the wrong way. How do I want to do this? Let's see. I guess I want to bend it this way. That'll be the... Yeah, it's pretty resistant to being bent. It's a very inflexible cable, and they don't give us a lot of it on this power supply. I suspect we can make this work, but it's just not going to be as pretty. Darn it. Yeah, we have to twist it. Not much choice. That is a tough cable to get on, and that's because of the power supply. Wouldn't fault the case manufacturer on that one. Then we've got our 12-volt CPU power, or EPS power. It's going to be SATA. You know what? Since I've got it in my hands, let's go ahead and... There you go. Yeah, this is going to be fun to cable manage. Put that in there just to get it plugged in. We've got an ARGB cable right here, which can go onto the motherboard. Do we have ARGB on this board? It looks like we've got one right up here. Let's see. Just trying to keep everything clean and untangled as much as possible. For the later part, when I do the cable management, I realize you're not going to get much views on the inside today, but we are going to hopefully improve that over at Studio C. Uh-oh, this may not have ARGB. Oh, you know what? I do see an ARGB header all the way at the bottom next to the front port umbilicals. We're going to route that down up through to this front port. That's good. Through there. Sometimes getting the ARGB plug lined up a little bit difficult. There it goes. Okay, so that is now plugged in. And then finally, our 12-volt CPU power connector, which is now even more tangled up. Tangle that. Man. Okay. Got it. That's going to go right up in this top corner right here. So we will feed that in. And on this case, it's going to be tight to get your hands in there and plug that in, but not as bad as some others I've seen. This would probably be easier if the case were laying down. Okay. Those are done. And then just the rear case fan remains. So I'll take the wire tie off of that. That's just an ordinary fan. There's no RGB on it. Get the cable untwisted. And then we've got to find a place on the motherboard we can plug this directly in. We want to try to hide the cable as much as possible, but we also don't want to just run to the nearest fan connector if it's in the smack dab middle of the board, because there's no way to hide the cable there. Now on Gigabyte boards, there's often a cable up in the corner, but this is an ASUS board, does not have that. They do have a fan header right in the middle of the board. Right there. So you see the white shroud for the I/O shield? There's a fan header right there, which is just super difficult to hide it. So even though that's the closest fan header, it's not the one I want to use. So I'm looking around the board, and I'm also looking at the length of fan cable I've got here. And it looks like maybe I can bring this cable out through here. And will it reach all the way down to the bottom? I do have fan headers at the bottom. A long way to go. But I really want to hide that cable. I think we're good. We are good. So on the lower right side of this motherboard, which I guess is, come around and show you, we have pretty much all of our front port umbilicals across the bottom. Front port power switches, the ARGB plug, the fan plug I just plugged in, our USB 3 and USB 2, and then we just take the slack and push back in, push back down through the hole. Don't push it too tight because you don't want to bend the plugs on the connectors and have them pop off. But, you know, just to reasonably see how that had to twist. But that's on the power supply maker. Now I guess we can plug it in and turn it on. If we did everything right, it should just work. Let me step around so as I can seize. And we're going to give our Ethernet plug in there and get our HDMI plug in there. We'll get our power plug since I'm back here. Switch is in the off position. That's good. I'll go ahead and now flip that to the on, and we can see a little RGB happening in the motherboard there. I need my keyboard and mouse, and we should be good to go. I'll use one of these top USB ports as it's a great way to test it. Because if my keyboard and mouse don't work, we'll know that I don't have the USB ports hooked up correctly or they're damaged. So now to turn this on, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the lights. That way you can see the flames and smoke a lot better. Here we go. Is it booting? I don't know. Let's go over to our HDMI input and see. I'm going to say it's booted. Now you notice everything is blue on the fans and on the, it should all be tied into the ARGB, which means we need to download the ASUS Aura software to change the colors. Now, if you don't have an ARGB header on your motherboard, you don't have to hook that up. Now, I don't know if they give us a button up here for changing the colors, but let me just take a look at what we've got up here. I don't see a power light either. Let me tilt this down. Okay, yes. We have a power light, and we have a hard drive activity light that blinks on and off when we're reading or writing. And we have a button here that says LED, and if we press LED, it should change the colors of the fan. And just for the look of it, even though it's mostly done on this side, right? We can hide the cables just a little bit more. This glass is 100% clear. It's not smoked at all. So you're going to see every cable that you didn't hide. With a smoked glass cover, pretty much in the dark, you're only going to see the light shining through. And in the daytime, you may only see the light shining through. There's your build. There is your build. Let's go back up here to LED. I guess that turns the LEDs off. There's one setting, another setting, another, another, another. Just leave it on red. Another. These are all the static solid colors. I'm just cycling through to see what we have. A lot of choices. I think we're back around. Yeah, and then we're back off. So those are all the options. The one I liked, see if I can find it again. Gone through it too quickly. That's the one I like right there. Okay, and we're right at 3 o'clock. You couldn't have timed that any better. That's the build for today. And thanks all the members for making these builds possible for us to be able to do these videos. Thanks to our friends at Acronis and RoboForm for their help offering you guys 30% off of their products and free trials to download and evaluate. So you don't have to take my word for it. And we have walkthrough tutorials on how to use the software here on the channel if you search for it. So let me see if I've missed anything in the chat. Oh, check the phone. I haven't checked it all day. I think I've got everything. Thank you for all your super chats. Thank you for your memberships. You guys rock. Off camera, I'll go ahead and do some cable management. I'm not going to go too crazy, just so I can throw the side panel on this, pick it up and move it over to Studio C. And there's one last thing here I have to move later, along with a bunch of little parts like the power supply and the motherboard that I would have to move very carefully. Now, I just have to move one thing. And then this is left over. This is our extra heatsink and Ryzen 3900X. It'll come up in something much later on. I'm not too worried about it. At least this is now functional without the requirement of a separate discrete GPU. Let's see. Just looking to see if there's any final questions here. Jose Lopez contributed a $1 super chat. It looks like I missed that one. Let me just go over here just to see once again if I've missed others. I hate when I miss them. Yeah, $1 from Jose Lopez, $2 from David Graham, and a welcome to our friend GAMDIAS Technology who renewed membership. Thank you guys so much. Thanks to Marlena. She's the one doing all the background administration work, and there's a lot of it, from thumbnails to video descriptions, links, tags, keywords, search engine optimization, answering your emails. If you want to email, use the email address in the About section of our channel to reach out. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you very soon. And until next time, bye for now. If you can see me, I'm like what I would look like if my torso were a PC. I don't know what that was. All right, finding an outro. Let's see, let's go with... There we go. All right, thanks again. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.